What's up, y'all? It's Zach from Living Corporate. Now, look, you know what we do, right? I come on here, I say, what's up, y'all? And I say it in this smooth way, right? And then I say, we're a platform that amplifies the voices of black and brown people at work. But just for those of you who don't know, we are a platform that amplifies the voices of black and brown people at work. Now, if you're new to the space, you may say, well, how do you actually do that? Let me tell you how we do that. We do that by having pointed, accessible, and real, authentic interviews with black and brown executives, leaders, movers and shakers, influencers, public servants, educators, activists, creatives, artists, you know what I'm saying, with everybody. And we also interview non-black and brown folks too, for those who are fragile and feel not involved. We got y'all too. You're welcome, as long as you are an advocate for black and brown people. And so, look, we do this, and today is no different. We actually have a great guest, like we do every episode, but I'm saying this episode really, for real, because sometimes I have a guest and y'all send me messages like, okay, but really this time, super dope guest. Our guest is Maureen Greene James. What's up, sound man? Give me some air horns right here. Okay, thank you. Now look, Maureen, she's an HR professional whose background, experiences, and expertise include HR leadership, talent development, diversity and inclusion, employee engagement, communications, and change management. Whoa. Maureen serves by bringing expertise and experiences in HR leadership, diversity and inclusion, talent leadership, development, employee engagement, and change management to Cognizant, serving as the leader. Y'all, check it out. Whoa. The leader of diversity leadership development for North America. So all of the states, right, including the little states on the side, for those of y'all who aren't too good at geography, Alaska and Hawaii, those spots too, right? She's in charge of all of that, right? Now, to further enhance Cognizant's commitment to diversity, she plays a key role in the company's efforts around executive talent and leadership development while staying focused on building a diverse, high-performing pipeline of strong women leaders. Maureen has been recognized for her professional accomplishments in Black Enterprise magazine. Come on, Black Enterprise. And in 2014 received the Most Powerful and Influential Woman Award by the National Diversity Council. I mean, come on. I mean, what can we really say here? I got to drop at least one flex bomb. Maureen, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I am great, Zachary. How are you?
I am really well. So, kind of look a little bit of behind the scenes tea. I'm really glad we're able to sit down. We've been so busy.
We have. It's been a lot of stuff going on. I've been doing some travel for work, but it's all good. I'm staying busy, staying focused on all things inclusion and diversity within my organization as well as, within other organizations that I have the opportunity to be in front of and share my knowledge and expertise.
Okay, well, hold on. So you say you've been traveling, and again, you say your organization as well as other organizations. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the other organizations that you've been able to share your knowledge and expertise with?
Sure. So I often have the opportunity to really utilize my platform and my voice to speak with other organizations and at conferences and inclusion summits. So I've, had the opportunity to be in front of MetLife as an organization just to talk about diversity and inclusion, and actually hosted a panel around inclusion not too long ago. I also have the opportunity to work with PwC, which is an organization that obviously I'm familiar with because that's where I was for the past, I would say, about 11 and a half years. So I do spend a lot of time really focusing on diversity and inclusion, obviously within Cognizant, but also making sure that I am sharing the knowledge and expertise as well as learning from other organizations too around what we're doing, what we're all doing in this space to really build an inclusive work environment.
Well, I mean, I just think it's incredible. And that's why we're just so excited to have you on the show today. So, I gave a bit of an introduction. We talked about, and just now you talked about some of the speaking you've been doing. And I talked about your professional background. But for those of us who don't know you, is there anything else you think you'd like to share about yourself?
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know me, knows that I am a really passionate, I don't like to say HR leader, even though it's probably what it says in my bio, but I'm a people leader.
Yeah.
I like to get in touch with the people. I like to know what's going on with people within an organization, what makes them tick, what makes them get engaged with the organization that they belong, that they work for, and what allows them to feel like they are working within an organization that has a very strong culture of belonging. So those are the things that are, really important to me and the things I'm passionate about professionally. I recently had the opportunity to speak at an inclusion summit for an organization called ATG, Advanced Technology Group. And, one of the questions that they asked me was around, so what are the things that people don't know about you? And I said, well, here's some things you don't know about me. I like to kayak. I like to read. I like to, learn. I like to hang out with my family. And of course, my favorite thing in the world is I like to spend time on the beach. But I try and mix all of that, some of the business and the pleasure together, so that I have what I like to call work-life, like some kind of work-life equality, not necessarily balance, because there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Listen, we could have a whole another podcast about that. I sometimes, because it's not true, right? Like, I think, anyway, no, I'm gonna go ahead and say, so this is, I sometimes talk about like work-life blend, right? And I've even had this was back when I was like 23, 24. I wrote an article on LinkedIn about, I said, work-life balance is a myth, because it is, right? Mm-hmm. Like we live in a capitalistic society, and like the rate of pay has not gone up with the rate of work. So whether you want to accept it or not, right? Like people are now working more than they ever have before and not getting paid commensurate with just the hours. Not even talking about like the thought leadership or the quality of just the hours of work that you put in. People at large are not getting paid for, and again, kind of direct with that, right? So this idea of like work-life balance, like I know the workforce of the future is this whole new topic, is this whole topic around like just how people are going to be working differently, because this cannot continue at the rate that it is. And so this whole idea of work-life balance, like you said, I don't think it's real either. So that's awesome.
It doesn't exist. Yeah,
it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And people call you pessimistic or whatever, but it's not. It's like that's not necessarily good or bad. It's just like, but you want to be honest. That way you can actually start creating some boundaries and kind of like just start determining what your atmosphere is going to be.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am. So look, let's just get into it. Okay. So now with Trump as president, I'd say we have a stronger focus on diversity and inclusion than ever before, but I'd argue that we've seen a sort of colonization of space where discussions around race are dismissed as elementary, right? Like gender is amplified and diversity of thought is a North Star. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what, if anything, do you think can be done to include more Black and brown folks, particularly Black and brown women, in these spaces?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Zachary. And one of the things I see is that when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we have to really be thinking more broadly around what does the diversity lens look like, right? So there was a point in time when the diversity lens looked like it was all about race and ethnicity, right? And so now women are a bigger and much larger part of the conversation, as it should be. But then there's also the opportunity for us to really be thinking more broadly around, like you say, Black and brown folks and Black and brown women. So we know that at leadership levels within organizations, we don't see enough of us. But there are some things I think that can be done to ensure that we really have a bigger seat at that table. For example, I love to see Black and brown women really put themselves in positions to be front and center, to be leaders. And that sometimes means for us stepping a little bit out of our comfort zone, right? And putting ourselves in places and in opportunities and on projects where we may not necessarily have every single requirement that let's say is in the quote unquote job description, but we have a good percentage of it. And so then why wouldn't we go for it? And that's typically something that women on a whole don't necessarily do.
Right.
And so just think about it from a Black and brown perspective, we do it even less because we feel like we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't put ourselves front and center for some of those things.
Right.
So I think that we need to make sure that we're putting ourselves front and center. I also think that we need to be seeking out mentors and sponsors. And the reason I mention both is because there's a difference, right?
Right.
So a mentor is somebody you're going to go to for advice and counsel on your career, and is it going the right direction, and that kind of thing. And people need that. Everybody needs that, especially if you're an emerging manager within an organization. But then if you're at a little bit of a higher level, but not necessarily at that C-suite level, then you need a sponsor. you need somebody who is going to talk about you when you leave the room in a really good way,
That's
not
right.
dishing all your business,
Right.
but talk about you in a really good way to say, I know that Maureen can do this because I have seen her do X, Y, Z. I know that she can win that client over because she has the skills to do this based on the work that she's done with a similar client, and I have been privy to that. So you really need to have that sponsor who's going to pound the table for you and say, hey, this is the woman that you need front and center. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, because I could go on for days, but those are some of the things that I think are really critical for Black and brown women to focus on.
So let's do this then, right? And it's interesting because I was just, you see a lot of these think pieces out lately, but I was just actually listening in on Dr. Janice, who is like, right? And so she was talking about how leaning in doesn't always work, right? Because like, what do you do? What do you do if so look, we just had you, Maureen Greene James, inclusion and diversity extraordinaire, leader of people, speaker, snatcher of edges. You know what I'm saying? You out here, you just gave us great wisdom and insight on what should happen and what we should do. But what happens when, first of all, how do we do that? How do we have those conversations and put ourselves out there? And then what advice then would you give to the people who are in power, right? Which is basically white men and women, on how they can be effective sponsors. Like, how does that happen?
That's a really good question. So advice I would give to people who are who looking for sponsors, what I would say is that you look for someone who doesn't even remotely look like you or sound like you, walk or talk like you. And that's a hard thing to say, right? It's a hard thing for somebody to get their mind wrapped around. So I'll give you a quick story. So when I was working for PwC, there was a point in time when I was looking for someone to really, I was looking for a mentor. I was truly looking for a sponsor, right? Somebody that I knew was going to give it to me straight. So it was going to tell me, yeah, Maureen, you're not doing a really good job at this, and yeah, you're doing great at this, and here's what else you can do to improve in that particular area. And I was also looking for somebody to talk about me behind closed doors when I wasn't in the room. And so I really decided to put myself completely outside of my comfort zone. And I went and had a conversation with somebody who I previously did not necessarily get along with. And I had the conversation for two reasons. One, I wanted to understand what it was about this individual that for whatever reason we just rubbed edges. So I needed to understand that just from my own personal understanding. And two, I wanted to understand it from the standpoint of saying, okay, so now that I have an understanding of what that is this the person that can really be my sponsor? And so I invited him out to lunch. And we had a great conversation. We talked about that one moment where we bumped heads. It was a few years before, but he remembered it very well, and I definitely did not forget it.
Right.
And at the end of that conversation, I simply said to him, here's what I'm looking for. And I would like for you to be this person to help move me along in my career, to help be that person who's going to step in and really be that person pounding the table for me. And he was completely taken aback and surprised, but elated at the same time that I asked. And when I tell you, Zachary, that he was probably one of the best individuals I have had work with me in my career. He was straightforward with me when he needed to be, and he was at the table, singing my praises, one, but two, really talking about what it was that I could do, how I deliver, how he's seen me deliver. And so I really think it's important that we step outside of our comfort zones and we don't look for people who look like us or think like us or who've worked in the same organizations or even in the same industry and sector. This person didn't work in HR, did work for the company, but didn't work in HR, didn't have an HR understanding, didn't necessarily want it. And that's why they were so critical, because they can give you a different perspective, something that you don't yourself necessarily see because you're in that space all the time. So that's one of the things I would definitely say is critical. Step outside your comfort zone and look for somebody different.
I love that. And so then And so then on the other side, right? So like when you put yourself out there, what advice would you give to your non-melanated, right, counterparts on how they can make themselves available to be sponsors?
I love non-melanated.
You like that, huh?
I love that. I love that. So one of the things I would say is, I'm going to really try and step into their shoes for a second, even though that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. I would say it's very difficult for them to feel as though they can put themselves out there. And so the one piece of advice I would give them is just get to know someone. It's at the end of the day, Zachary, we're all human beings. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we do a lot of stuff alike, okay? We're really not that different. And I really think it's important that we are, that we encourage our non-melanated counterparts to feel like they can have a conversation with us. But to make them feel like that, we have to treat them the way we want to be treated. So in other words, we can't necessarily roll up on them with any kind of, any kind of negative thinking around how we think they're going to treat us or how we think they're going to approach us. Just have the conversation with them like you would anybody else. And honestly, you'd be surprised at how open and willing they are to really working with you. But sometimes they feel like they need to be given permission to know you. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier with Trump as president. So, I think that has created a lot of friction in terms of the way people just approach each other on a daily basis, right? Non-melanated people may think that they can't. I think they think that they can't approach black and brown people, right? Or they shouldn't. But before Trump, did we really think that? Did we really have that going on, or were we comfortable just kind of saying, what's up? Can we talk?
I wasn't, but I don't. But I do believe that it's definitely been more heightened now, right?
Yes.
Right. So, I think it all depends, right, on your background, right, on your story, kind of where you came from. I know, just based on so my family coming from the South and horrific experiences that they had, they've never really been comfortable in certain situations and experiences I've had as well, and just in my life, not even just singing my parents' song. There's always been a bit of hesitation. I definitely believe, though, to your point, I believe is that it's definitely been it's way more pointed now than it has been in a while.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate, because I think people, most people are inherently good and really want to help and want to engage.
Yeah.
But I think that they don't necessarily feel like they can or they should, and so they don't. And so it's almost like they want permission from us. And I think we, black and brown people, need to give a little permission. And it's hard. In this day and time, that's a really hard thing to do.
It is, right? Because there's so much emotional labor, and I think I know that you know this, but it's I think it's a huge blind spot, and I think it actually goes into our next question, which is around D&I programs and organizations. When they think about diversity and inclusion, I don't think that organizations are effectively factoring in just the emotional labor that goes into being other in majority white spaces. Nor do I think people really just black tax, right? So we're recording this on the day of Amber Geiger's sentencing, right?
Yes.
And black and brown folks who've been looking at the trial, specifically black people looking at the trial and seeing this person who was convicted of murder. So she did murder this person, crying and crying fake tears, crying to what many people felt were fake tears, and that could be triggering to a lot of different folks. The body cam footage being released, and like, so like just dealing with all of that and the PTSD like symptoms that just seeing Black death or constant coverage of Black death cause, like, those people still have to go to work, right? Those people still have to interact with people who may shrug their shoulders at that stuff. And so
absolutely,
I think, like, I just think, to your point about it being hard, I think that it's really easy to undermine or dismiss. I don't think that you can overstate how hard it is to make yourself available. I'm not saying that you shouldn't or that you can't, but I'm just saying, like, I wish that for me, right? So I know I'm interviewing you, but this is me just talking to you as someone who is in a position, right? As an executive, I wish that organizations would be more thoughtful to that, right? And I think there's just so much work to do. I'm curious to know, though, what you believe organizations are still missing when they talk about diversity and inclusion, like, and you have these conversations on the big stages and also in the smaller rooms. Like, what are some themes that you're seeing around organizations and kind of what they still could be developing when it comes to their programming?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think some organizations are doing a fairly good job, and then there's some organizations that are, they're trying to get there. They're doing the best they can, right? So one of the things I think is very commendable and courageous is having those bold and courageous conversations, right? I think that is something that is, it's innovative, it's fresh, it invites everyone to the table to have the deep discussion. At times they can get really real and dig deeper than anyone wants to go, and they can create emotions out of people that no one expected. But that's necessary to have an understanding of what everyone on all sides of the coin, so across the entire spectrum of diversity, is thinking and feeling. I think where organizations fail, so organizations that do that, I think they're doing great. But I think where those same organizations fail is that after they do that work, what happens next? So what are you supposed to do with those conversations? What is the expectation for the people who are sitting as part of those conversations? Okay, great. We had it. Okay, I understand that, you're, how you feel because this woman was just, convicted of murder. She's gotten 10 years. And yeah, I understand that. But what am I supposed to do with this? There needs to be and afterwards, there needs to be an understanding of, okay, so here's the way I feel, but here's the reason why I feel this way. And then there should be opportunities for people to bring that into the thinking around how we work, how we hire people in organizations, right? So are we thinking about talent of all colors? Or are we thinking about talent of just one color? So in other words, you have to take the conversation from just, engaging people and saying, yeah, here's what we did. We brought everybody together. We had a really good conversation. And now the organization is better for it. The organization is okay, but it's not better for it unless everybody in that conversation walks away with, okay, what can we do next? And that's the thing I think is missing.
No, I agree with that, right? And I think, so when you talk about D&I programming as a whole, like, it's just not restorative, right? It's not, right? It's not restorative, and it's also not policy driven. It's not data driven. It's not policy, and it's not results oriented by means of policies being updated. So, like, all the things you just said. So, okay, we had the conversation. Cool. This is how we feel. Okay, now this is what we're going to do about it. And this is how we're as an organization going to change. And this is what accountability is going to look like in light of the conversation and the insights that we gather. Like, that then makes the emotional labor worth something. But, like, if you're putting in emotional labor and not getting anything in return, like, not only is that, like, exhausting on the inset, but then it's defeating on the outset, right? Right. Absolutely. And so that's huge. I think that's huge. And again, really leads us into the next question. So, okay, you're the first. So we've interviewed some folks, right? I'm not a name dropper. Okay, you go to Living Court Podcast out. Y'all check it out. Y'all can see the people that we've talked to. But and we've talked to folks who have been in, like, these global or national positions around inclusion and diversity. But I believe you're the first person that we've spoken to who is, like, in their title integrating inclusion with leadership. And so can we, yeah, so it's pretty cool. And I think and I believe that's like I really believe that's the next level or the next phase when you talk about kind of reclaiming D&I. I do see like more and more black women and black and brown people being in these positions of inclusion and diversity, much more than I have in the past, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Right. I've seen an uptick in that. I think like when I talk about like kind of decolonizing D&I, I talk about like reclaiming this space. That's part of what I mean. And so, can we talk a little bit about how you've led the strategy for Cognizant to drive the intersection of those two spaces, and then also what you're continuing to do?
Sure. So at Cognizant, I've had the opportunity to, like you mentioned, be on both sides, right? So diversity and inclusion as well as leadership development. So within Cognizant, the leadership development is really, their global leadership development team is really focused on growing leaders at the director and above level. And within doing that, it's also focused on making sure that our people at those levels are very diverse across the board. What I would say, Zachary, is that we have a long way to go, right? I don't think we're different from many other organizations out there. We do have a very long way to go in terms of how do we continue to build this inclusive strategy specifically, for our directors and above. And so while I am focused on everybody across the organization, regardless of level, obviously,
right,
my leadership development role is only focused on our directors and above, but I make sure to keep a diversity and inclusion lens on that population of people, because when individuals see diversity at the higher levels of the organization, it attracts more people. It allows us to retain more diverse people because now they're able to see levels and opportunities and projects and roles that they can aspire to.
Right.
And it helps us to grow and develop that population. So it helps us to grow the diversity that we do have at the manager and below level into those leadership levels. So it's we like to say it's a cyclical win-win, right, at the attract, retain, and develop pillars. But what I will say to you is that our focus primarily for the past year and a half or since I've been there has been around gender diversity. And so I bring a different lens to it because I'm not thinking about let's bring any women in. I'm thinking about what do the women look like? Where do they come from? Where have they been? Right. What industries, what sectors, all of those things. But I'm really also making sure that we're building into this a diverse lens. So we have some black and brown people at the higher levels. So we make sure that we're incorporating individuals with disabilities at those levels, right?
Yes.
All of those things. So we're incorporating our LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
We need to be able to have people at those levels who are going to be the people that other individuals in the organization aspire to, or other individuals outside of the organization see and now say to themselves, well, if so-and-so can be a leader within this organization, there's an opportunity for me here. There's an opportunity for me here to start somewhere. So that's what the strategy has really been built around, making sure that, one, we're focused on gender diversity, but we're looking at it across the lens of all the components of inclusion.
You're bringing intersectionality to the table.
Absolutely. All day, every day.
Amen.
All day, every day.
And I think, Maureen, like for me, everything you said, of course, 100% spot on. I think what organizations don't realize is, for me anyway, right? When I come into organizations, I've been in a few different places, so I've seen a lot. Like I've seen a variety of cultures. But I always, when I come in, I consider myself about like an A- employee. Okay, I feel like I'm great. I'm not like the best, but I'm very, very, very good. Because I have other things going on. I got to live in corporate. I got time. I'm okay. Like I got other stuff. But with all that being said,
I hear you.
You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna keep that extra plus for me. But my point is, I'm a very strong employee. So when I come into organizations, I have aspirations. I have goals. I typically, without even like actively trying to do it, I just end up kind of zooming in on like the senior most black people. And I look and see how they're treated. And I use that as a gauge to feel like, okay, let me just think, okay, so this person has a doctorate and an MBA, international experience, interned with the UN, can speak 3 languages, 2 more than me, and 2.5 more than me, sometimes, and they're still being treated like this. So what does that then mean for my prospects as someone who's looking to build a 5, 6, 7 year roadmap here? Right. So 100% right in that, the treatment, how you treat, I mean, people see those things, right? So let's pause for a second though, because I want to go back to something you said. You talked about the director and up. Have you noticed a pattern of Black and brown folks kind of like climbing a ladder and getting to the director level or like senior manager level even, and just kind of stalling out?
Yes.
What's the reason behind that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, and that's an every organization thing. It's definitely not a Cognizant. No, definitely not. What I would say the issue behind that is that people in those roles tend to stall out because the higher you go within the organization, a lot of times you don't see people who look like you. So the people who have the power
social capital.
To make the decisions to therefore promote a Black or brown person into those high level roles aren't necessarily there.
Yeah.
So they're looking through one lens, and their lens is typically people they know, people they've worked on projects with before, people they went to school with, people that they're in the same social circles with, those kinds of things. And Black and brown people aren't necessarily always in those places.
Right.
And so I think that is part of the problem. I think the other problem is we as Black and brown people sometimes tend to hurt ourselves because we don't necessarily put ourselves in those positions. I can speak from experience. I did it to myself and almost derailed my career years ago when I decided that I didn't want to attend an event that I was invited to. But I responded and said I would, and then at the last minute said, you know what? No one is going to notice if I don't show up. And so I declined it at the last minute. And sure enough, next day I walk into the office, the person who invited me says, Maureen, we missed you last night. Now, this was not someone who looked like me.
Yeah.
It was somebody who I thought really wasn't even paying attention to me. But obviously he was. And I made the really poor executive decision to not go because, and you heard me say it, I thought I was not going to be missed. No one is going to notice if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Long story short, I go and later on in my career, and I worked for this individual, not once, not twice, but 3 times in my career.
Wow. Yeah.
And this man, I don't even know if he ever remembers this story, and I always say one of these days I need to remind him. But this individual, when he invited me for a reason. So that's why I say we can derail ourselves. If you get an invitation like that, and this was a senior leader, take advantage of that.
100%. Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. Don't ever think, and that's the other thing. Don't ever think people aren't paying attention to you. They are. Especially if you are doing great work, like you said about yourself, you're an A- player, which I'm sure you're an A++. Even if you remotely think you're an A- player, somebody's paying attention to you. So I think we need to do a better job of putting ourselves in places where we can be seen. But that all goes back to the point of being on those high visibility projects. And how do we get there? There has to be somebody at the top that's pounding the table for us to get there. So it's kind of cyclical. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like you're almost like stuck in a
loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
No, it is. It is. Now, we've talked a little bit about programming. We kind of had a meta discussion about D&I, but then I'm curious, right, from a leadership perspective, if you were to give 5 key traits of inclusive leaders, those 5 key behaviors, what would they be?
It's a good question. I would say definitely someone who's an inclusive leader is someone who's a good listener. And I don't mean someone who's just going to kind of listen, say, okay, next. But someone who's really going to listen to what you have to say, someone who's able to replay that back to you, right? Recap that and say, okay, I understand. So tell me, what would you like me to do next? How would you like me to proceed? So not just listen, but then get to understand what needs to happen next. Second thing is be a great giver of feedback. It's really, really important to give feedback because feedback really, truly is a gift, but it's also important to get feedback. So I always encourage leaders that I work with not to feel like because they're in a quote unquote leadership role, that they're just supposed to be the people who give feedback. No, it has to be reciprocal. And they have to not only ask for feedback, but then they have to ask follow-up questions so they can understand what is it that they're doing well or not doing so well, so that they themselves can change and evolve their own behaviors. The third thing I would say is an inclusive leader should be somebody who's able to pay it forward. So be able to reach back, reach to the sides, reach wherever, and pull somebody along, take somebody along for the journey that they're on. Because it helps that individual learn and grow in their own respect. And, I always tell leaders, you didn't get here by yourself. Let's just be real about some things.
Right.
You took the same journey that now this individual behind you is also trying to take. So do the right thing. And if you've got somebody that wants to move in the same career path, or may want to do something different, but can use your guidance and expertise, pull them along with you. The fourth thing I would say is an inclusive leader should be somebody who is able to truly bring a team together. And, bring them together. I'm not saying bring them together for lunch. Yes. I'm talking about bring them together so that they have a good understanding of who they are as a team. What are the team goals? What are they striving for? And most importantly, as a team, understand what each of them individually are able to contribute and bring to the table. Because it is the individual nuances that we all bring to an organization or a team that helps us to be a successful team. That's how we create inclusive products, inclusive services for our clients, is by bringing those innovative and inclusive voices to the table. So an inclusive leader should definitely be somebody who is able to bring a team together. And then I think the last thing I would say is that an inclusive leader needs to be very mindful of the fact that they are the ones who have the ear of the C-suite. And so they need to be individuals who can listen and hear what's going on the ground, so across their teams and other teams, and be able to articulate that and bubble that up to the top so that any issues or concerns that may be rising are things that they're able to squash before it becomes a bigger issue. They've got to listen in on what's happening at the ground level and be able to help manage, to help do some kind of change management or navigate the conversation so that it doesn't become a bigger issue. But if it's getting there, they should be the ones who are able to bubble it up to top and then say, okay, so what can we do to mitigate this? I think that's really it.
Wow. No, absolutely. Thank you so much. You just dropping bombs, dropping coins, as it were. Yes. Yep. Like just it's real. No, it's really helpful. I was trying not to cut you off because I had like a couple of these, but I was like, let me just wait.
I'm sorry. I'm just going on forever.
No. It's great. No, it's absolutely great. This has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know we went a little bit long. Before we let you go, any parting words, shout outs?
Parting words and shout outs. Parting words are, just be, for everyone, anyone who's listening, just be the best human being that you can truly be, Never take for granted where you are because again, you didn't get here on your own. Really, really important to reach back and help others. And then any shout outs I would give are simply to all of the people who are in the position as you are, Zachary, to help get these kinds of messages out. Kudos to you, because this is not easy. You know, doing what you do is not easy. Having these kinds of deep and courageous conversations isn't easy. So kudos to you. And then shout outs to all of the people who are driving diversity and inclusion within their organizations, because, you know, we've got some work to do. People love to say to me, you know, well, you know, in your role, you're going to have a job forever. It's like job security. Here's the thing. I'm not sure I want to live in a world where the need to have a diversity and inclusion leader is job security, because that means that means two things. One, the world's continuing to evolve and, you know, components of diversity continue to change. That's good. But two, it means we're not doing everything that we could and should be doing to make this a more inclusive and global environment. And so I don't know if I want that job security. I want it to be where it's just very organic, you know, that we're not thinking about, well, you know, how do we hire Black and brown people? Where do we go to get them? No, it shouldn't be that way. And I know I've probably gone on way too long.
Not at
but
all.
So my shout outs. Yes, so my shout outs to you, my shout outs to my peeps who are doing this day in, day out and are leading the charge right along with me. So
come on now, let me get these air horns right here for that.
Love that. Love it.
Man, this has just been great, Maureen. Thank you so much. And listen, y'all, that does it for us on the Living Corporate Podcast. You make sure you check us out on Twitter at livingcorp_pod, Instagram at Living Corporate. And you know, you got our website, living-corporate, please say the dash.com. We also livingcorporate.co, livingcorporate.org, livingcorporate.tv, livingcorporate.net. Maureen, we have all the living corporates except livingcorporate.com. We have all the living corporates. You know, it's market dissemination. We really out here. We're trying to make sure we get the SEO clicks. Come on now.
Absolutely.
We're trying to. Now, listen, y'all hear these conversations that we have. If y'all ever have questions y'all want to send in and like have us being the host or our guests answer them, just send them on in. You know, DM us, email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You know, and we can just get it popping like that. Now, look, if you can't remember all the different places I just said or where we are and where we're at and what we're doing, just Google Living Corporate. We out here like that. It's been like 130 some odd episodes. So we're now at the point now, if you just Google Living Corporate, we'll pop up. Okay. So you check us out. And until next time, this has been Zach, and you've been listening to Maureen Greene James, D&I leader, North America at Cognizant. Till next time, y'all. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.